Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. Welcome to another episode. In episode 231, we preview the Detroit Lions' trip to the nation's capital, where they're going to take on the Washington Commanders, a rematch from last year's playoff game, though it might look a little bit different. We'll get into that, plus hear from a reporter who covers Washington to go with insights of our own. In addition to those things, we'll also talk about the state of the Lions roster now that the trade deadline has passed. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Trevor Nowaski, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Coach Jerry Angers, the former Michigan High School Coach of the Year. He was also named Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's the scouting and training director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, another week, another football game. Good to be talking about both with you.
Oh, definitely. Moving on. Getting to 1-0 this week is going to be totally awesome.
All right, helping us to do that is Sports Writer of the Year for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated. That is the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle, James Cook. Good to have you here, James.
Always good to be here.
All right, folks, we want to let you know our show is brought to you by Roaster Jack Coffee Company. They come out of Traverse City, Michigan. They've been doing this for about 25 years plus, and they've been roasting premium beans from small farms around the world, fresh to order and just for you. And the only thing better than great coffee is great coffee with a discount. If you visit roasterjack.com, you use the code LIONS, you'll get 20% off your next order. So, Roaster Jack Coffee Company, be a hero, brew great coffee, and go Lions. Okay, we've had a chance to have our coffee. We've had a chance to exhale a little bit, sleep a little bit, and the Vikings game is in the past. We're moving forward. You can't forget it, but you got to learn from the past. So the other big event that took place within 48 hours was the NFL trade deadline. The Detroit Lions did not make a trade at the deadline. They made some moves, but not a trade. A lot of people were calling for defensive end trades. They said the Lions needed to bring a defensive end in. They needed more depth there. James, what are your thoughts? The Lions not making a move at that spot?
Not surprised at all. I was trying to warn people. Brad Holmes doesn't do this generally. And whenever he does, it's been just kind of a little minor deal. I mean, and even Zadarius Smith was a different thing, I think, because of Aiden Hutchinson being out and being such a big part of the defense that was a splash move for Holmes at the deadline, and that was giving up a 5th-round pick and giving a 7th back or something. The other trade deadline deal he's made, I think, was Donovan Peoples-Jones. I didn't really expect much of a move, and if so, it was going to be something small, just something here or there. You only saw one offensive lineman moved in the whole trade in the run-up to the trade deadline, and that was Trevor Penning from the Saints. And Saints fans were rejoicing that they traded him away. It wasn't anybody I think that the Lions fans would have been happy with, aside from just the fact of just making a deal.
All right, and Coach, how about you on that defensive side of the ball, defensive end? Lions fans were like, we need more depth because you've got Muhammad over there, but Davenport's out. But when he comes back, a lot of them aren't too sure when he'll be back and for how long that would be. But the Lions said they're good. Dan Campbell said they're good, and they've looked pretty good for the most part. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think we need anybody defensively. We got guys coming off IR. We know that there's guys coming back with Pascal and those guys. So, we're pressuring people as well as anybody. We're up there in sack leading. We're up there in total defense and stuff like that. So, why add a splash offensively? Again, we got guys coming back. We got guys on IR. We got guys. We built this program for the last 3-4 years, this team, and we've had the depth. If you're getting somebody on through the trade at this time of year, Yeah, there's teams that are dumping good bodies, but there's also a reason they're dumping that person. So um, I know everybody's going off of the Eagles because the Eagles signed three guys. Well, the Eagles also lost a ton of guys from last year's team. And one of the guys they signed is, I think he's on his fifth, sixth team in the last 4 years or 3 years, where he's been on a team, went to another team, went back to that team, went to another team, went to that other team, went to another team. Now he's at this team. So whatever, Brad Holmes, keep doing what you're doing. Dan Campbell, keep coaching like you're coaching. Well, we know that you're mad about last week's game, and it'll be rectified this week.
Coach, I think you lost me on that third team of switching. And at that point, you're exactly right. It's a lot of teams in one season or two.
Yeah.
Uh, but let's switch to the other side because that's the area we were talking about last episode, and before that, that the one area that maybe it made sense to make a move for was offensive line. They've got injuries, but they've also played with issues during the bye week, even before the bye week. Campbell said that the guards were veterans now. He kind of elevated them up, but let's be honest, the team has still missed Ragnow and Zeitler in those positions from last year, and we talk about stats being misleading. We have had a few very long runs this year, and that probably helps your run per average stats. This is just the eyeball test. I didn't dive deep into these numbers, but it feels like last year we might not have had as many of these big explosives like we did, but it felt like we had a lot more medium range runs, like 10-yard runs, 8-yard runs. And we were usually able to run for 2 to 3 yards more consistently. And we didn't have so many of those negative plays that put us behind the chains. Now, a number of people were concerned after Sunday's game about Decker, right? Because he hurt his leg and he was asked about it, and he said, I can't really tell you because of all the stuff I'm taking for my shoulder. I don't really know about the pain till it wears off. And you're like, wow. I mean, we know what this guy's going through and playing through, but that's not a good sign. We know they lost Mahogany. Dan did say, though, because they asked him about it, he said, we know what we have, and there's the good and the bad that comes with that, but we know what we've got. And that's better oftentimes than not knowing what's coming in the door. So the Lions did make some moves. We'll get into those, and we've got some people coming in, but not a trade. So, James, again, back to not making a trade, but this time along the offensive line. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, just today they started the clock on Miles Frazier, which is basically adding another offensive lineman, like adding somebody through trade. He was what, your fifth round pick this year, so a round earlier than Mahogany, can play the same position. I don't think he's going to be ready for this week or anything,
No.
but they started the practice clock on him, so he's going to be playing within 3 weeks, if not sooner. So it's like they added a guy, and it would take you that kind of long just to integrate a new guard to an offensive line anyway, before he's kind of fully got the whole system down and everything. So, I think maybe that was the reason why they didn't pull the trigger for a guard. In the fact that they would have had to give up draft capital, which Holmes does not like doing, and and that they had a guy coming in, and that they also like Coyote Awashika. He's somebody that they can plug in at guard, and they feel confident in him. And they brought back Natane Muti, who's somebody who they've liked in the past and had in the practice squad before. They brought in a couple other guys, so they got some bodies there in case some of these other guys go down. But I don't think that they were as desperate as fans were.
All right, and Coach, you've already kind of hit on this on why the Lions don't do some of these things, but with the offensive line part, James kind of added to it, right? We know Muti, we saw him in the preseason. You're getting Miles Frazier. Now he's got some ramping up to do with all the time he's missed, and I think Campbell likened that to Mahogany from last year. But what are some of your insights and thoughts on Lions not making a move? And I think you already alluded to this. They're not trying to keep up with the Joneses because other teams are other situations.
Mhm. Well, he likened Frazier to a baby fawn, which okay, of course when he said it, I started laughing thinking about Bambi on the ice, but that's what it's going to be for a while. And but he's a dog, and you got Colin too. He can play guard and center. I saw some of his blocking when he played for the Ravens at centers. I think it was 15 of them. Somebody posted 15 of his run block, and then he gets after it. I thought he was playing well. I even we talked about during the preseason over Kingsley at center. Colin came in and finished up the fourth quarter, I think, in the first preseason game, and I mentioned to you guys, I watched the film and I said, he's a tough, hard-nosed guy. So I think we're in good shape right there. I think that's a guy that can play the guard or the center spot for us, and Glasgow can jump around in any of the guard spots if we want to put somebody else in at center. I mean, I think the depth is there. He had the injuries, but again, we're not seeing a splash on the free agency because we don't know. We have not talked to Decker in the hallway, nor have we talked to Sewell in the hallway that said, I'm probably able to go. I mean, again, we don't see those reports. Dan never, he'd alluded to it today. Sewell just said, on his Twitter account, hey, I'm playing. This team is counting on me. So, we don't have all the facts, so we can't make the big decisions.
All right. Well, and yeah, Sewell did say, to some reporters he does plan to play. We'll have to see how all that goes.
Mhm.
I'm always open to getting my big thing was some more support behind the tackle position, but there are some guys who do have some flexibility. I do think getting Frazier involved is a hopeful sign. As you mentioned, Cologne, we saw him in the preseason. He got hurt. He is back, and so I wanted them to make a move. I wanted them to bring in depth, but I'm not going to fault them for not doing it, only because when did we draft Christian Mahogany in the sixth round? Those late round
Mhm.
picks matter to the Detroit Lions still. Um, and I'm not going to say just because the other teams are doing this. I think Jeremy Reisman from Pride of Detroit listed about 7 different teams and said, I guess none of these teams are going to contend for the playoffs either. And they were all teams with winning records who didn't make moves at the deadline.
Yeah.
And so the Lions aren't going to knee jerk react to what other teams are doing. They're going to look at what they have and what they want to do to move forward. And if something makes sense, then it would happen. And Campbell said, he tells Brad doesn't bring anything to him unless it's like looks like it's going to happen. Then he says, how would it fit? Because he's like, I don't want to know how it would fit if there's no chance of getting a deal done. And so, I'm sure they explored ideas. They've talked about that in the past. It didn't work out. So the Lions are good. At least we hope they're good. We're going to find out if they're good. But let's stay with the offensive line for a minute, Coach, because we've heard about this idea of shuffling. Some people on social media have talked about it. Coach Campbell was asked about it, and he said, we're going to try some different things out because we did mention even before the injuries this week, the offensive line did not look like it was doing as well as last year. And I'm not putting all this on the offensive line. Everybody has struggled with their blocking on the offense. Tight ends, wide receivers, running backs. It's been a collective. I don't know if Goff has tried to block anybody, so I'm not going to grade his blocking this year. But the thought of shifting people around on the offensive line, Coach, how complex is that at this point in the year? I think we all would have liked if Ratledge would have taken the center position by storm out of camp, and you would have had Glasgow back at right guard. Those things didn't happen, so this is where we are.
Yeah, and I think the Ratliff thing, we go back to that again. We talked about it. It's so hard for a rookie to come in and start at center. And again, how many center reps did he have, prior to that? That's just tough. And I think they just felt more comfortable with Glasgow. I think because he had started some games last year there in a fill-in mode. So, but it's tough. It's tough. The nice thing is with Cologne is he's played that position. He's played that position and some guard stuff. So, that could be maybe that was one of the change ups they were talking about prior to the injury to Ratliff. And so I think we're gonna, but it's to move. There's the old rule. Don't screw up 2 positions for one. But maybe somebody was starting to play better at the center spot. Maybe somebody, one of the guys that have been filling in during practices and stuff. So I don't, and again, the other part about him switching guys around and shifting guys around, like he said, maybe some walkthroughs and stuff. People do that all the time because what if Glasgow does go down? What if Graham goes down, who's going to be the center? Well, you got to give him some reps. It's not like, It's not like some of the the high school programs where the same five guys run the same 150 plays during practice. You gotta put different bodies in different spots and make sure that they're accustomed to it or at least comfortable to it if their number is called. You're always one play away from being a starter, and if you're third team, you're always two plays away. So that's what the Lions are doing when they talk about that stuff, and we'll see how it shakes itself out in practice this week.
All right, James. I mean, the Lions do have the fortunate situation of having a lot of guys cross-trained, so to speak, where they can move over a little bit. What are your thoughts on the shakeup or possible adjustments to the offensive line and/or staying pat and just putting Coyote in there and running as it is?
Yeah, I think that's quite an option too. I mean, it could just be that maybe they've determined that that Ratledge is ready to play center now. That he's had more work in practice, and maybe they just flip-flop him and Glasgow, put Glasgow at his better position of right guard, which is more of his natural position. That could maybe help out the whole line if Ratledge is ready for center. I don't know if that's the case or not. Obviously from training camp he wasn't because they kept him at guard, which is more of his more natural position. But I think that they eventually want him to play center at some point. But it could just be that they wait until next year and draft a center and keep Ratledge where he's at. He's played pretty well so far at right guard. So, uh, they have guys that have played multiple positions. Frazier's another one of those guys who's played, quite a bit of everything. Hasn't really played much at center, but has done some working at center at the Senior Bowl and some of those kind of things. So he's got a limited amount of experience there, but he's played most everywhere else. So when he's available, he's another piece that's somebody that they can fill in when they need to. And then they've got these other three new pieces that they just added today. In Conley and Hubbard and Muti. Those guys all have, I think Muti can play both guard positions,
Mhm.
has maybe a minimal amount of experience at center, but I don't think a lot. Conley's kind of played all over everywhere except for center. Even a few tight end snaps at Boston College, which is weird because he's 6'7", 335. Uh, and Hubbard, kind of the same thing. Hubbard's actually not even that big for an offensive lineman. He's only 295, which in today's game is kind of on the small end for an offensive lineman. But he played a little bit of tight end too, a few tight end snaps last year for the Giants, I believe. So they've got options. They can, if they want to move guys around, they can. I think, like Coach says, the easiest thing is just only change one position and just put Coyote in at left guard and go from there.
Yeah, and coach, I mean, we saw Glasgow at left guard last year,
Mhm.
and I know you got the PFF grades on that, and
Mhm.
what we even saw at the end of that Washington game, him walking off the tunnel there, talking to Goff, and it was a struggle at times, and so uh, the left guard is the position the Lions need filled, and Ratledge is a rookie, and so what are the complexities of moving things around and Coyote Awashika played right guard and left guard in the same game, one snap apart from each other. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But he's been repping and he's got experience. He's not a rookie. So, what are some of the complexities that go into this that maybe the average fan doesn't think about?
Well, I think that with Coyote, Decker even said it. He's comfortable with him between him and Glasgow because I think there was two games last year that they started those three guys on that side. Decker was down, and I think Glasgow filled in, and he filled in there. So, yeah, it's just there's so the center, and we've seen it, and the reason the Vikings had such great success last week was that the center position was not Rags, and it was Glasgow. And I mean, Glasgow's not going to say he's as good as Rags because nobody, I mean, Rags might have been the best center in the NFL last year. The guy that make the calls, he's longer, a little bit quicker in his steps and stuff like that. So it's just such a hard thing. And I think that's one of the positions they're not going to mess with. Just because the complexity of the center position for the Detroit Lions. Now, if somebody's ready, one of those, if Colin's ready, then maybe he's the guy that they stick in there. Campbell said that Ratledge he's not moving him. He wants him to get that guard position straight down. So So I think that, keep him there. He's playing so well. He's, grading as high as, some of the best guards in the league right now. And I think so that's kind of what it is. So, but yeah, there's that center position is huge. Darren Keaton, who played for me at West and at Central, played for the Lions for 3 years. He played both guard positions and center until he got injured. And, I talked to him about that many times. That was one of the reasons the Lions liked him so much was because of his athleticism and how smart he was to play those. But it's rare. It's rare for a guy that can take all three of those interior line positions.
All right. Well, I'm sure anybody that's listening, you already saw the length of this show
Mhm.
before you even hit the play button. As we're doing this, I can already tell you this is not going to be a short episode. We have so much to get into, but we will try to be as brief as we can and as concise as we can. But we have to talk about, is the sky falling on this team? That's the next thing, right? We had super duper overreaction after week 1 and the loss to the Packers. I don't feel like we had that reaction to the Lions after Kansas City, but something happened after this past weekend, James. Is the sky falling on this Detroit Lions team?
I don't think so. I mean, fans, I think, overreact a lot during the course of a season. Uh, Fans are invested, they're emotional about the team, and they should be. But I mean, given what happened last week, if they come out flat again, then maybe it's time to worry. I mean, if they lose to this Commanders team that is basically the Lions from last year as far as injuries, I mean, they're already pretty decimated from injuries. Then maybe it's time to be pretty serious about worrying. But I'm not worried at this point. I mean, before anybody starts jumping off a cliff or busting out the pitchforks in front of John Morton's house, the Lions are still the number 3 offense in the NFL, despite having their bye already. They're third in the league in points scored. Indy and Dallas, the only two ahead of them. Dallas has the second worst defense in the league. Their defense has only allowed 23 points less than the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Cincinnati Bengals had one of their wide receivers caught in a hot mic ripping their defense after that game last week. So, so the Cowboys needed to make some trades for somebody on defense, and they did. And that was their splash play, but I mean, they traded a lot for those guys too.
Well, and James, you're not going to believe this, but even after last week's play by the Detroit Lions, they're now the number 2 scoring offense in the NFL. They moved up. They're only trailing the Indianapolis Colts, which is the other bizarro, weird thing happening. But you guys, Dan Campbell talked about that when he was a player, he was on a team that had a really good record. Everyone came back the following season and thought it was going to be business as usual, and it wasn't. They were not nearly as good. He said it's a reminder there's no guarantees. And right now, this team is not as good, and I look at that as execution on a lot of things, but they still have time to get it fixed. I believe they've got the right people in the building to do it. Think about all the people they've intentionally drafted or brought in to make sure they have the right mindset there, and they've got the right coach. If you've ever seen a coach with the Detroit Lions, this is the one that can do this because he's got the experience. Now, I feel like this is the biggest adversity the team's faced in a little while. I mean, they faced a little bit after week 1, but now it's going to be interesting to see how they rebound and how everybody responds there. And, Campbell said, Coach, they need to clean some things up. It could be the best thing for them in the long run because a season ebbs and flows. It's never consistent. You have experienced this firsthand. I've got no doubt, again, that the Lions can get it right. I think it's just a question of will it work out and will it happen? But what are you seeing on this?
Well, I agree. I mean, we lost the game 56-13 one year. We ended up in the state finals, so it is one of those things. I think the worst part about this is we came off a bye. We were going to fix some things, the third downs for one, and we turned out and got hammered on all three phases of the game. The offense didn't play well. The defense didn't play well, or gave up some short scores, and the special teams didn't play well. And I think that's what the panic is. That's that, man, we're going to fix these things and nothing got fixed. It got worse. And so, from that game, again, we played the Minnesota Vikings. They got some dogs on both sides of the ball. They got one of the best D coordinators in the game. They got one of the best head coaches in the game. And we beat them, what, five, six times in a row? It's a
Yeah.
rival, and things are gonna like that gonna happen. And it was like Dan Campbell said, it was the perfect storm. I broke down. I spent 5 hours breaking the film down. Started at 4:30 in the morning on Monday because I couldn't sleep because of the loss. And brought my coaching thing and went through and watched every play. And when Dan Campbell says it was one thing here or one thing there or this or that, he's exactly right. There were so many opportunities. And I'm gonna bring this up real quick because I don't know how many people noticed it, but Raymond Khalif, he totally annihilated Van Kinkel on a screenplay. Totally annihilated him, laid him out. The problem is he got laid out into Gibbs's feet, and he was smart enough to reach up and tackle Gibbs. If the block is to the right a half a step or to the left a half a step, Gibbs probably goes to the house. So
Wow.
there's just things like that. So yeah, if it happens again this week, yeah, we better panic. But I cannot see things going that bad in a football game against us in all three phases of the game.
All right. Well, let's move forward. Transactions. James, you've already alluded to some of these, but the Lions didn't make a trade, but they've made a number of transactions in the past
Mhm.
few days. What's happened?
Yeah, well, they started the clock on Miles Frazier and Josh Pascal.
Mhm.
So those two will be back within the next 21 days. Um, I mean, they'll start practicing right away, but they should be ready for game day within 3 weeks. I think they have um, to do that. They also signed three players to the practice squad. They signed Jack Conley, that massive offensive guard that I mentioned, 6'7", 335 from Boston College. He was on New England's practice squad earlier. Um, he would have played also with Christian Mahogany
Mhm.
in school. So I'm wondering if the Lions saw him on some tape
Yeah.
when they were looking at drafting Mahogany and noticed this guy. They signed veteran offensive lineman Chris Hubbard, who was with the Giants last year, mostly played left tackle for them after some injuries, played 8 games, started three. Um, Numbers were not great. Uh, so he was rated as he didn't get enough snaps in for the whole season to get a PFF score or PFF rating as far as out of how many guards or whatever. But his scores overall were not great. But he also didn't play left tackle a whole lot. I think they played him at left tackle out of necessity. He's more of a right tackle and can move in and play some guard, but a veteran NFL guy he's 34, lots of experience. I think if the Lions aren't throwing him out there at left tackle, he would be all right. But the Giants put him in a position where he didn't. That's not his thing. And then they brought back Netane Muti, a guy that the Lions fans are familiar with, been in the training camp for the Lions for the last 2 years. They were pretty high on him. I know Penny Sewell was very high on him in training camp, said that he was a beast. And so he's another guard. And so they're bringing these guys to the practice squad. And maybe if Decker can't go or something like that, then you elevate Hubbard and have a put him at right tackle, I would assume, and move Sewell over to left because Hubbard is much better at right tackle than he is at left.
All right. So bringing some pieces in, some works in progress and whatnot, but not resting on their laurels, trying to, make sure the team has what it needs to move forward because this division is suddenly extremely, extremely competitive. The 5-2-1 Packers are playing the Philadelphia Eagles this week. The 5-3 Lions are in second, tied with the Bears at 5-3, and the Vikings are 4-4. Thoughts on the division? I'm going to say, had the Lions won, it would look a significantly decent amount different because the Vikings would be down at 3-5. A lot of people would maybe be counting them out, probably unfairly. But now it looks like it's going to be a full on battle for at least the next month, if not longer. And everyone is in this battle, coach. And that's the way most coaches would expect it to be in a division.
Oh, for sure. And I just got one. We control our own destiny. That's all I need to say about the division.
There you go. If the Lions win, it's good and it takes care of itself. Otherwise, if they don't, then you've got to figure some things out. And you can't just be hoping for help. This is what I'm
Mhm.
getting at, right? You got to win those games. As you said, we had a big winning streak going against the Vikings. We were undefeated again. We were undefeated in the division last year. Things that don't always hold true. The Bears, they're on the at home against the New York Giants this week. And I said the Packers are taking on Philly. I believe that's a Monday night matchup. And then the Vikings are at home against Baltimore. James, your thoughts on the division?
I mean, it got tighter, like we said, that if the Lions dropped that game against the Vikings, it was going to get tight, and that's what happened. The one good thing is that the Packers also looked horrible last week, and they lost who is I think low key their best offensive player in Tucker Kraft. He has played 90% of their offensive snaps over the last 2 years at tight end. Really got better as a blocker. I know people think of him as a receiving tight end, but he had really gotten a lot better as a blocker, and had, I think, just been kind of maybe one of the more complete players on their whole offense. And then they suddenly lost him, and they were trying to look to trade for. I heard Mike Myers, the tight end from the Raiders, but that didn't happen. Um, so, so there's that going in the division, in that they lost a major cog in their offense. The Bears gave up 42 points and 400 passing yards to Joe Flacco, and the Bengals. Their defense was just. I don't know if you guys watched that game,
Mhm.
but we had a friend of ours that was over who's a Bears fan, so we had a second TV on. They had the Bears game on, and man, the Bengals defense is horrible.
Yes. Well,
Even
and
to
I
this
want to.
day.
I just want to add one thing. Joe Flacco actually threw for 470 yards.
Oh
James.
yeah, over 400 yards. Yeah.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, hey, let's start moving forward here as we creep towards the preview. Finally, let's hit up the injury report. How's that looking, James?
Well, I mean, the Lions have obviously a lot of guys out, but like you said, Sewell said that he's probably playing this week. Taylor Decker did not practice on Wednesday, but that is not unusual. Kirby Joseph did not practice Wednesday. Pat O'Connor and Dan Skipper also did not practice today. Limited guys were Mile Frazier, Josh Pascal, Craig Reynolds, Malcolm Rodriguez, Jacob Sailors, and Grant Stewart, who is a new one on the injury list. And full practices though for Terry and Arnold, Ty Summers, the linebacker who they had brought up a couple of weeks ago, and safety Daniel Thomas, which is another important guy to have healthy with if Kirby's not going to play.
Hey, James,
So
let me ask you something on the injury report. If they have more than one injury or more than one ailment, do they usually list multiples or do they just list one?
I think it goes by the team. Some players, some teams will list more than one thing, and some will not.
Okay.
Some will just list what's the more serious or the newer one.
All right, because I see Taylor Decker's only got listed as shoulder, so that's why I was just wondering.
Yeah, yeah. I think that they can list it as kind of what they want if it's more than one. I mean, you see on the Commanders one, there's for Laramie Tunsil, he didn't practice, but his is listed as hamstring/rest.
Okay.
But they had a lot of guys who did not practice this week or practice on Wednesday either. I mean, and a bunch of them are not playing. They already said Terry McLaurin's out. Jaden Daniels is out. Von Miller did not practice. Zach Ertz did not practice, but that was rest. And like Larry Tunsil, like we said, and then a bunch of other guys that are limited, including Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, their number one running back, I'd say, out of the committee of three guys that they use. And Bobby Wagner came back and had a full practice after having a thumb injury. So he's an important linebacker for them.
That he is. All right. Well, now it's time to get fully into the preview for the upcoming Commanders game. We're going to start with our interview with ABC 7 News sports reporter in Washington, D.C., Natalie Spalla. Joining me today from ABC 7 News in Washington, D.C., is sports reporter Natalie Spalla. Now, as we get started, a couple things to note. Even though Natalie's covering the Washington Commanders, she is actually a Michigan native and a Detroit Lions fan. And her and I both worked at the same TV station. We worked at different times, so our paths didn't cross, but it was the same station here in Michigan. Natalie, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. A special day. And yes, I'm glad we have a couple of connections too. We love Traverse City, so that place will always hold a special place in my heart for sure.
For sure. Well, let's dip into some of your expertise, the Washington Commanders. Not the season thus far that I think most were expecting after last year's playoff run. Jaden Daniels was hurt. He's now hurt again, and we'll get into that. But going into last weekend's game, what's been the difference this year? Has it just been Jaden Daniels missing some time, or has there been more to the story?
I think there is a lot more to the story, and as much as I don't want to put this on injuries, I mean, this team coming off in such an incredible season, a season that I think a lot of people entering last year wouldn't have believed by any means in terms of not only staying, scot-free when it came to the injury bug. We were probably the healthiest team, and that had to have, had some sort of an impact on the stretch of the season. But Jaden Daniels, I mean, just an incredible rookie season. You couldn't have, come up with anything better than what that young man did a season ago. And also, I think a lot of people would remember there were so many games last season where it came down not only to the final play, but to the final drive. And a lot of the
Yeah.
times, Washington came out on the positive side of that. So when it came to good juju, the football gods, every possible thing that could have gone right for this team, it did. And we're just seeing the complete opposite of that this year. This team, not only has the injury bug, came early and often for this team, they don't look good on offense, defense, special teams, you name it. And I think all of those different aspects of the team were exposed Sunday against Seattle. I mean, the turnovers, the mistake-ridden football. I mean, and then yes, of course, you mentioned Jaden Daniels, his elbow dislocation. It just is coming at us in all sorts of ways. And I think a lot of people and a lot of fans, not only are they stunned, but they're also pretty upset too at this point.
All right. Well, the Commanders are at 3-6, losing record on a 4-game skid. But let's try and start with what positive there is.
Ooh.
What has Washington done the best this year? What has, outside of, within that gloom and doom still shined a little bit?
That's a great question, actually, because I mean, the thing you search for in all sports is consistency, and there has truly been none of that. That's been the biggest problem. There were, storylines throughout the beginning of the season of our seventh round running back, Bill Krosky Merritt. He took the league by storm in the early weeks of the season. Again, a seventh round draft pick, but he came in here, had a bit of a story to him. No one knew who he was, but he was this explosive, shifty running back that would pick up 7, 8 yards with every carry. And we were like, this might be the answer at running back for us. We've just gotten rid of Brian Robinson,
Yeah.
even Austin Eckler. He went out at the beginning of the season. So that was probably the biggest and the best storyline of, wow, this is maybe we found an answer in this seventh rounder. But since then, that magic has kind of dissipated as well as the entire Washington Commander run game. Yes, Eckler went out several weeks ago, but now Bill not looking quite like the running back that we saw. Perhaps the running back that looks like a seventh rounder. I mean, it's 2, 3 yards at this point, but I mean, just the injuries. I mean, I could go on about the negatives. I know you asked about a positive, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around one, but that was a positive storyline that lived on here for several weeks. Positives, though, positives.
Yeah.
It's so
What's the team doing best right now? What's their best attribute at this point?
I think the attitude of this team would have to be the best. I wasn't personally at practice today. Usually my days are Thursdays. But going inside the locker room and hearing from players, not only, this past week, but the weeks prior. And then our sports anchor here, Scott Abraham, he was in the locker room. I just listened to all the sound he collected today. It's the positive attitude that it doesn't feel like their backs are against the wall. This is a team that says, we've got a lot of football left to be played. We know what the mistakes are. We know we're capable of fixing those mistakes. And, the mentality is an aspect that is so important, especially when teams are going through week after week of loss and loss and loss. And not only losses, but pretty brutal losses. Their last 3 games of their 4 losses have been by over 20 points. And, that can play that mental aspect in sports, I think, it gets talked about, but it is a very true, a very real thing. And this is a team that, whether or not we see it on the field, they have no quit. At least that's what they're telling us. They're not going to tell us, oh, we're feeling down in the dumps. We're not feeling it this week, but it's player after player giving us the same stuff in the locker room every week. we're not giving up hope. We know what we can do to fix these mistakes. And so that positive attitude, I think, is the biggest positive at this point of the season.
All right. Well, on the other end, you've talked about the injuries playing a role. Um, what is it that has changed the most on the field? Is it been the lack of a running game? Has it been a drop off in defensive production in a certain area? Because, like you said, the last three games haven't really been close. And so, what have been the difference maker or makers?
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of football is that everything is so complementary. I mean, one area of the field struggles, whether that be the injuries or just, lack of production, and that's going to impact another aspect. I mean, you look at the wide receiver issues we've had this year. Terry McLaurin, whether you want to buy into the drama of the offseason, him holding out for all of the preseason, coming back, not immediately getting injured, but pretty quickly getting injured. And this is a guy who, throughout his entire career kind of hang his hat on the fact of not getting injured, and now he will be out for the foreseeable future as well. So you mess with the wide receiver aspect, and you got Terry, you've got Noah Brown, who hasn't seen essentially a lick of football all season, and then Debo Samuel's not going to be a guy who you is your main guy. Let's call what it is. And so you look at those guys, and you're like, well, who am I going to throw to? So then you look to the run game a little bit and you say, okay, we've got Austin Eckler, we've got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, we've got Chris Rodriguez, who started the year inactive. I think arguably he was our best running back during the preseason and a guy who's constantly earned his stripes throughout his time here in Washington. He's still not getting any action. Well, then Austin Eckler goes down and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, yes, he was looking like a star running back, but suddenly teams were figuring him out. And so every kind of aspect that this team has dealt with, at least off, and then you, of course, you got to factor in Jaden Daniels, the fact he has been in one game, out of another game, in one game, out of another game. I mean, that lack of consistency, yes, it is a very real thing when it comes to personnel. And there has essentially been, I mean, too much of a fluid situation here where one guy's playing one week, one guy's not playing the next week. And so that's probably been the biggest issue. And I mean, the same could be said on the defensive side. There's been so many guys we've lost on that line. And I know Lions fans are like, oh, we know what that means to be losing players left and right. But that's been the biggest issue is that lack of consistency and then it's just too fluid of a situation that, players will always hit you with the next man up mentality. But, there's a difference between playing with guys and not playing with guys.
For sure. And my next question was going to be, something people outside the Beltway should know about this team that they might not know. I think you hit the nail on the head with that positive attitude, and that
Yeah.
probably comes from Coach Quinn and the leadership there. Anything you'd like to echo on that or add in addition to it?
Yeah, I mean, this team, I think that's if you're looking for a silver lining of this group, that's got to be it. But that's the thing is, this team has lived by the slogans since Dan Quinn came to town, like anybody, anywhere, anytime, like doing good with good people. That's what they have on, the walls of headquarters, on their t-shirts at practice. And it's like, yes, it's one thing to live by these mottos when things are going well. They lived by them all last year, but now it's kind of hitting the fan. And are these players continuing to live by the words that you walk into training camp and you see it, or you walk into headquarters, you see it everywhere. So that's what's really testing. And that's, I think, where more questions are starting to, arise from the media is this team who they say they are when it comes to, having your back against the wall. And so that's what's been nice about this team is that, yes, you can tell no one likes to lose in any sport. It's no shock there, but this is a team that, continues to try. I think at practice today they played Don't Stop Believin', which they always play music when they're warming up, but that was a song I think a lot of people in the media were like, "Oh, that's a new one. I don't remember them ever playing Journey at practice before." So that was a kind of a different bit of a angle there at practice today.
Yeah, don't stop believing. And they probably got to hear the word Detroit in there too.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
very timely. Well, let's hit that quarterback position real quick here. What are you expecting from the Commanders now that they know Daniels isn't coming back? You said, he was in and out. Mariota's the guy for the foreseeable future. How is that going to change or impact this team, you think, or their game plan?
Yeah, I think that's maybe another silver lining outside of the positive attitude is that Mariota had his moments last year where he had to come in when Daniels couldn't play. And for the large part, he did a successful job. And that's also been the case for the most part this year. I mean, there if there is like a lack of, consistency, yes, it's at the quarterback position as well, but I think the Commanders can't really say that about every team in the NFL. They have a pretty good, quarterback one, quarterback two. Nothing's really changing between Daniels or Mariota. And so I think a lot of the players they can appreciate that. I mean, Mariota is a vet of a vet of a vet. He is as calm, cool, collected as he can be. He is, a leader in that locker room. And when Dan Quinn did come to Washington 2 seasons ago, those were the guys he wanted to bring into the locker room, guys that could, kind of be the foundation of leadership and accountability and at least lead the younger guys a little bit in that regard. And thankfully he's done that. He's very well. He's one of those guys you love talking to in a locker room, I will say that. But the players they respect him, the players they love him and appreciate what he brings to the field. And yes, him and Daniel's games are a little bit different. I don't think Mariota obviously is not much of a rusher like Daniels is, but he does have that ability in his game. I think a lot of people forget. So you can look at him as a guy who's going to steady the ship for the foreseeable future. I just don't know who he's going to be throwing passes to. That's the question.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to let you off easy on this next question because when I interviewed the reporter out of Minneapolis last week, he was fairly confident that the Vikings didn't have a chance against the Lions, even with the quarterback change. And I was skeptical of the overconfidence of a lot of people. Even though the line was big and I was optimistic on the Lions, I was skeptical about the quarterback change with JJ McCarthy and the Vikings losing badly the week before. There's a lot of things that line up similarly, but different this week. The Lions aren't coming off their bye. But straight up legit, if Washington wins this game, if they're going to go ahead and win it, what does Washington have to do to get the victory against the Lions?
Who I think, if I can't answer it this way, I think Detroit's going to have to do a lot of things right, and I think it's going to start with them protecting the ball. Washington has been not so great at taking the ball away from teams, but very bad at when they do take the ball away from teams, they do not cash in on any regard. So, my thing is that if Goff is going to be throwing interceptions, he threw three the last time these two teams met. Washington needs to find a way to get points out of those turnovers because they just haven't been able to do turnovers and turning turnovers into points this season. I think that could be the difference maker in this game. On the flip side, if Washington, or excuse me, if Detroit wants to win this game, mistake-free football as, much and as often as you can, which of course was maybe a little bit of an issue too last week. So we'll have to see what versions of these teams we see on Sunday because that was the thing kind of last year too, is that I remember Detroit fans so confident that Commanders were going to come to Ford Field and, it was just going to be the Detroit Lions show from start to finish. And we were quickly realizing that, oh, shoot, this is not what we expected it to be. So I'm not going to be confident when it comes to anything. I will be confident when the score or when the time on the scoreboard hits zero, actually, if I can say that.
For sure. And again, that's one of those things you kind of answered. The Lions made so many mistakes against the Vikings. And a lot of people
Yep.
view it as the Lions beating themselves in that game versus the Vikings out beating the Lions. Again, the Vikings won the game. They did what they had to,
Yep.
but the Lions made a lot of mistakes that, kind of hurt them. Well, as you mentioned, both teams came off a rough weekend game, and it's not just Washington, the Lions too. I don't normally do this with a guest covering another team, but being that you grew up a Lions fan, you are from Michigan, I want to take a moment. I would love to hear your insights or your biggest overall takeaways on how you view the Detroit Lions so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't seen the same level of success that they saw at this time a season ago, but they're healthier than they were at this time a season ago. So I think we can put two thumbs up in that regard. Um, Play calling, I think, has been a little more inconsistent. I mean, yes, Ben Johnson was the guy of all guys when it came to play calling. We were so lucky to have him for as long as we did. But I think a lot of people I think the jury's still out on both of our offensive and our defensive coordinators. So we'll have to see. I'm cautiously optimistic about what this team can put together throughout the rest of the year, but I just want them to stay healthy. And I know they're all dealing with their fair share of injuries as well. Um, but nothing's going to be as worse as it was last year at this time and as in the weeks forward for this team a season ago. So that's kind of my take on them. It's kind of a light take. I think they've got all the talent in the world to be a very special group, but I think the jury's still out on that for me a little bit.
Did you do a season record prediction before it started by chance?
Ooh, I didn't actually. Did you
Okay.
for the Lions?
I did. I predicted 12-5.
Okay, that's safe
So
actually.
it is. It's one of those things where I knew there's going to be regression for multiple reasons. I've
Yeah,
often said there's not a team they can't beat. They can beat everybody on their schedule, but
yeah,
that doesn't happen. And last week was a perfect example of a team they should have beat, like
yeah.
multiple others in the NFC throughout the season, but they didn't. And so, yeah,
I did do that for the Commanders here. I think I picked 10-7, but that looks very well out of reach at this point. So we all pictured kind of speaking with other members of the media here, pictured a little bit of regression as well because, how do you top that? I mentioned all of the positives that happened to this team a season ago.
yeah,
But I think the regression is a little bit more than people thought, but that's football for you.
that it is. No two seasons are the same.
No.
Natalie, anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, good question. Lions fans, keep being positive. We're a very positive fan base. It's a little bit of a different story out here in Washington. I think a lot of Washington fans are very hurt, very upset, feeling all the emotions now that this team is not what they thought it originally was a season ago. But I love the Lions fan base. We are always so positive. We always cheer on our boys. And so, any Lions fans watching this, hats are off to you guys.
Guys, again, really good insights there from Natalie. It's fun talking to her and knowing that she actually used to live she grew up in Michigan. She
Mhm.
worked in Northern Michigan for the NBC affiliate, and now she's out there covering the Commanders, but still rooting for the Lions. So that's kind of a unique preview here. But let's talk about what we make of this team, coach. Proof that once again, every year is a new year. Nothing is guaranteed. They're losers of 4 games straight. Even with Jaden Daniels in many of those games, they've lost. A number of injuries have plagued them as well. But what are we making of this Commanders team, coach?
I don't. I think it's the in and out, the different injuries and stuff like that has changed a lot of things for them.
Yeah.
And it's that they had a great year last year. Surprised a bunch of people. Then you get a year under their belt. You get a year under their belt with the year of film, and defenses can make changes for certain situations. But when you're losing your trigger man. Even though he is playing in some games, he's coming in off injuries, he's coming back off injuries. Their schedule's a lot tougher this year than it was last year. And, of course, since because of, what their record was. And, but Dan Quinn's an unbelievable coach. And we see what happens in the NFL if you're not prepared or ready to go. So, some of the things, some of the DVOA, you guys, I'm up on that. But,
Yep.
our total is fourth. The Commanders is 16th. Our offense is ninth. The Commanders is 20th. Our defense is fourth. The Commanders are 22nd. Special teams, we're 10th. The Commanders are second. So they got us in special teams. So, but again, it doesn't, we can throw all those numbers at and everything like that. And, the big thing is we have to play Lions football this week or we're going to have 2 losses in a row.
Yeah. That's you're exactly right. And that hasn't happened uh, in 3 years, I think
Mhm.
is the right time
Not
frame.
saying it.
All right. James, what about you?
Yeah, well, that the advantage that they have on special teams could also be blunted in Luke McCaffrey going into the reserve, and he was their kick and punt returner,
Mhm.
and doing really well at both, as well as being a pretty reliable wide receiver in there too. So their whole wide receiver core is beat up. Their defensive ends are decimated, and they're missing a whole lot of other players outside of Jaden Daniels. This team is kind of a shell of what it was because of injuries. Unlike the Lions, it's not just concentrated in one side of the ball like the Lions had the defense last year. It's kind of all over the team.
Yeah.
So they're having to move things around everywhere. You mentioned that they lost 4 straight. 3 of those have been by 20 points or more.
Mhm.
So they're not even not losing, they're losing big a lot of the time in those games. They were early in the season, they were really good at generating pressure with just only using a four-man front. They didn't blitz much. They didn't have to, but they've lost four of their edge rushers. Probably their top four edge rushers are
Wow.
all out and are going to be out for this game. Dorrance Armstrong had 5.5 sacks. Drake Johnson had three. Rookie John Baptiste had a sack. He was a seventh rounder who was in their rotation of edge rushers, and Dietrich Wise, who kind of like their Josh Pascal, their big defensive end, who's the edge setter. All those guys are on injured reserve.
Wow.
So their entire starting four now on the defensive line has one sack between them, and that's won by Daron Payne. They still have Daron Payne and Javon Kinlaw inside a defensive tackle, which is a nice pair of defensive tackles right up the middle. But they're just decimated at defensive end.
Yeah, the Vikings were pretty banged up, but they started getting healthy, and they were getting healthy when they saw us. Um, but this Washington crew seems to be on a whole different level, and they didn't just get their starting quarterback back; they just lost their starting quarterback. And so, even though the Lions looked really bad last week, you guys, and they're favored by 8.5 in this game on the road. I mean, there's some similarities, but yet some differences from what last week's prelude was and this week's prelude with a team who was not doing well, a team that had injuries, but Washington's is at a whole different level. That being said, and again, I'm not taking anything away from the Vikings. They did what they had to do to win the game, but the Lions contributed to that loss last week significantly. And I think we have to look and see, what are we expecting out of the Commanders against the Lions this week? Because if they play a solid game, which they're very capable of, the people that are there, it's going to put the same situation on the Lions coach as they were in last week, which is you've got to take care of your business. So, what are we thinking the Commanders are going to come out at? Because speaking with Natalie, she said they are a very positive team. They are very confident. Coach Dan Quinn has them believing. So I'm expecting a fired up Commanders team in here, regardless of their situation. And I think they're going to show up to play.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, they're gonna, it's the NFL, and that's the thing is you can't, they think they have a wounded lion coming in. They're smelling blood in the water. They don't care if they're wounded. They're going to come after us, and they're going to do, and they're going to build off. Hey, look what we did to them last year. Look what we did to the Lions in playoffs last year. This is what we're going to do. Players, Lions interior offensive line doesn't look very good. We're going to be able to put pressure on them. Hey, we're only going to bring, well, now we're going to bring more blitzes. Let's steal some of the stuff that Flores did last week and see if they can do it. I mean, there's just, this is the big thing. No matter who they have playing, whether it's a first string or second team or not, doesn't matter to the Lions. Lions have to be Lions. Lions have to block right. Lions have to tackle correctly. Lions have to cover on special teams. And that's one of the things as a coach, I wouldn't even look at who they have playing or who I wouldn't look at who we're playing because right now we're playing ourselves. And ourselves is us getting better. Ourselves is us doing the things we have been making mistakes with all year. There's a lot of mistakes that are flashing week in and week out that we haven't corrected. Okay, and this is we're into week 9 now at playoff, or week 10 actually, but our ninth game. Why are some of these things not corrected? And I think that's what the Lions. It doesn't matter if our offensive line is banged up. We have to correct these things. One of the things I want to throw out real quick on a number, the Commanders' defense has allowed the third most completions, 28, and a league high 843 yards on a vertical routes.
Wow.
843 yards on 28 completions.
That's more
That's
than
just
8 football fields.
that's unbelievable. But you know what? The Lions are fifth lowest rate in the vertical route, only 14.2% of their passes.
I believe that.
So, right? So when you talk about they're giving all these points up, they're losing by 20s and stuff, people are attacking them vertically. Are we going to do that this week? Those are the things, what are the Lions going to do? And how are they going to win? How are they going to attack them? And what can they get done with? And again, the Vikings put on a unbelievable show, unbelievable film for opposing defensive coordinators to look at and say, this is what we're going to do, the Lions. We're going to see how the Lions are going to. I mean, I can go through. We got numbers. You guys already talked about. I already talked about the DVOAs. But if the Detroit Lions don't play like the Detroit Lions can, and make corrections and figure this thing out, we're in trouble. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. That's just my feeling. Do I think it's going to happen? I just hope we block right. We don't decide to go inside when we got outside contain, and we make sure we fill our lane integrity on kickoffs.
All right. Well, James, what are you expecting out of Washington going into this game from the Commanders' perspective?
Yeah, I think do they stick with just only using the front four for now, like they did before, even though the front four is missing four guys from the defensive end rotation, or do they start bringing blitzes? I think that's a bunch of questions. They're going to have, they got a couple of safeties. They just lost Marshawn Lattimore for the season to injured reserve, one of their starting corners. So they're kind of beat up everywhere. So you kind of don't know what they're going to do.
Mhm.
Um, they're going to have a whole bunch of new pieces, and you don't know what those guys. You're not going to have as much film on them as you had on the other guys. So it is a big question mark on what they're going to do defensively against the Lions. I don't think that they can sit back and just have, basically their fifth and sixth defensive ends and expect them to win consistently. So I think that they're probably going to give them some help, but you never know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're obviously going to find out here really soon. Another thing I want you guys to know about is that this episode is being brought to you by Roaster Jack Coffee Company out of Traverse City, Michigan. And if you want to find out what their coffee tastes like, just go to roasterjack.com, put your order in, add the code LIONS, gets you 20% off. They'll ship it right to your door. All right. Well, what are we expecting out of the Detroit Lions? Coach, you started getting into this a little bit. You gave us some insights. I think we're going to have a focused team here, a determined team. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what we have to see. There is no bye week. They came off their bye week. They said the right things. They talked it, but it didn't show up on the field. You already brought up. I think they have to be ready for that interior pressure from Washington. Dan said so himself. He kind of opened this up by what happened. Now everyone's going to try and copy that. So I
Mhm.
think this is going to be a really good test for the Lions,
Mhm.
Coach.
Well, the good thing too is even with the banged up offensive line, who's starting at center, who's our guard, who's going to fill in where, who's coming in. Is Sewell healthy? Is he 100%? Is he well? No, he's 100%. The only day you're 100% is the first day of practice, and but and the same thing with Decker and what's going to happen there. So the nice thing about those change up is maybe we're going to go back to the drawing board and just say we're going to focus on these aspects. We're going to shrink that game plan down a little bit, close that book a little bit, and let Goff, do the things that he does by controlling it. That's offensively, I think that's one of the biggest things. Defensively, I just think we gave them some things again. He had a couple good passes, that were dimes, but we can't give them short fields. Anybody's going to score. The percentage of scoring on a 36-yard drive is pretty high. And I think that's one of the biggest things we're going to have to do. Stewart got double teamed on that kickoff return last week. Trevor squeezed and got held a little bit. Couldn't get his shoulders for that 61-yard. I think it was 61-yard return, the first one. So those things are going to be nullified. Maybe Stewart's never been double teamed before. I've never seen him get blocked before, and he got blocked. And again, I'm not faulting him just for it, but there's just some things. Biggest one of the things I want to talk about. Minnesota's quarterback run around the edge in for a score.
Yeah.
We didn't seal the edge on that one. Here's something on Mariota. He's got 13 scrambles this year. He's completed 4 of 8 passes for 81 yards, 6 first downs, and an interception, with also scrambling to run 5 times for 34 yards and 2 first downs. So the biggest thing about that situation is we have to keep him in there. The kid, and you got to remember the guys that are filling in right now are playing for their NFL career lives right now. And so they're going to give everything they got because they want good tape. They want to be kept around for next year. If they don't, if they're cut or whatever, things like that, somebody else may pick them up. So that's the thing. This is the NFL, and there's you're the elite of the elite. No matter if you're first string, second string, third string, came off the your undrafted free agent, came off the couch. Working at Myers, there wasn't there a quarterback that used to was a bag boy or something. He ended up winning a Super Bowl for the Rams, and so these guys are playing for their jobs. These guys are playing for the livelihood. These guys are playing for paychecks. So we better have our wigs screwed on.
All right. Well, James, what are you expecting out of the Lions? I like Coach's analysis and breakdown there. What do you got?
Yeah, well, they do have a lot to correct, obviously, from last week. Not a lot of time to do it. I think that they need to use play action more. They've kind of gone away from that this season and haven't used it nearly as much. I think it's down about 50%, um, as much as they were last year with Ben Johnson. So maybe they need to also maybe use Skipper more as that sixth offensive lineman to give Decker some help. If he's hurt and he's playing through it and everything. Give him some help. Give him Skip on his outside shoulder to get another hit on that guy. And then maybe even use off of that and get creative and throw the ball to Skipper or something weird if you want to do something weird. But those are things that the Lions used very successfully last year, and they've gone away from them. So I think maybe reincorporating those would be good. They've also used pre-snap motion a lot less this year. That's also about half as much as this year under Morton as it was last year under Ben Johnson. And I think that Jared Goff really likes the pre-snap motion for being able to read the defense, and it's something they've kind of gone away from. So I think they need to reincorporate that as well. Obviously, losing Mahogany is big, but I think that they can just slide Awashika in. He's been a solid, steady vet for the Lions for a couple years here. So, I think that they need to start reincorporating some of the things that have worked well for them in the past, and just do some of those things, add them back in. All these guys on this offense have mostly been here the last 2 years, so they know how to do those things. It's not going to be hard. Do what you did well.
All right. Well, I've got one other idea, and Coach, I'm
Mhm.
mostly saying this in jest because it's not
Mhm.
really going to happen. But uh, if the other teams are putting 8 guys up there, and I got this idea from a reporter who was just saying the Lions need to just spread things out a little bit because the
Mhm.
receivers are always close to the line. And I don't remember the exact reporter who said it. May have been Jeremy Reisman from Pride of Detroit. But I'm taking it beyond that. Okay. And I'm not saying we go to this offense. You may have seen it in the notes. But what if you really, really spread people out? As in, what if you have David Montgomery in at running back and you go run and shoot? You put up 4 receivers, spread them wide out, like the old run and shoot days. Now,
Mhm.
you can laugh and say it's an antiquated thing, but that's kind of like what Washington did against the Lions in the playoffs last year, where they spread everybody out. Now, obviously, they had Jaden Daniels, who was a running quarterback, but if you were to put St. Brown and JMO and Khalif and Laporta out there, or maybe you take Khalif out and you put Gibbs out there, and then you put Monty in the backfield, you've really spread it out. You pull the linebackers out a little bit, or there's only 2 on the field, and maybe there's less guys to block up the middle. Just having some fun with old school thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, there's again that stuff is all determined, dictated by what a defense does to you. You know, you take the Viking, would take the Vikings last week with all their different blitz concepts, and they'll bring guys off the edge and roll that coverage down and stuff like that. Do we get more guys out of the box? We ran the first second game, I think it was second and third game. We ran 12 personnel a ton and got him behind there. I think we're also our receiving blocking is not as well as it was last year. I
Right.
don't think it's I know that I don't. We're not running at last year we ran more at our receivers concept even with the 12 personnel to the opposite side. This year it doesn't seem like we're doing that as much. Um, Again, I think we're just some things up front are getting messed up. We take week one. That was it was an outlier. We talked about the Chiefs game that we lost to. That's the Chiefs. That's a pretty good football team, and it was there. But then at home against the Vikings, it feels the door was falling off. So how much can they change on that? And going back to what James said, our third downs, we're not doing as much motion. We're not doing, or he said, we're not doing as much play action, PAPs. Well, the reason we're not doing that is because our first and second downs aren't doing so well. So can we spread them out and hit them a little bit better than that? Can we put Gibbs? I don't know how many times we ran Gibbs and Monty on the field at the same time last year. I saw it numerous times, especially where they're sprinting Gibbs out and bringing him back. And we just got to figure out. I just have a funny feeling with the way Washington's defensive line is. I think we may just go big personnel 12 and the extra lineman and just try to run somebody over and let us get back into that phase again. I don't know. I know that first and second down is driving Dan Campbell crazy.
Oh, for sure. And I guess it comes to that blocking. So the wide receiver blocking is part of it.
Mhm.
I also wonder about the wide receiver three position. We've talked about it before. Um, Tim Patrick and Khalif Raymond combined for 50 receptions last year.
Mhm.
All right. And we know the type of blocker Tim Patrick is. Right now, and Isaiah Williams had two. So that puts you at that number. Right now, the Lions have 12 receptions from Raymond and Tesla combined. And so the production from the three spot is on the lower side. It's not trending to equal what it was last year. Um, James, do you see anything about that three spot, or you think it's just one more casualty of all the other things that haven't quite worked out for the offense?
A little bit of that, but I think also some of that usage has gone more to Sam Laporta this season. Uh, Last year at the beginning of the year, he was dinged up, so they kind of went away from using him a lot because of that. He was still on the field and he was playing, but he wasn't 100%, obviously.
Mhm.
So they went to Khalif and the Tim Patrick a lot more because of that. So this year with Laporta healthy, they've just kind of gone back to him. His targets are way up.
They are,
Um,
yeah.
and the wide receiver three is way down. And part of that also may be that the wide receiver three bat now basically is a rookie in Isaac Taselaw. I think that they're trying to baby Khalif Raymond's use this season and keep him healthy for the end of the season so that he can make an impact on special teams. So I think that they may be physically just trying to limit how many snaps he takes, just because he has been a guy who's been dinged up a couple of times the last few years, and he's not the biggest wide receiver in the world either. So if they can get the offense to go without having to play him a whole lot, great. Keep him for special teams and then unleash him on returns later in the year and in the playoffs. I think that would be great. And that's something I suspect that that's what they're doing, but I don't know, maybe it's not the case. It's just my speculation. But um, so I think that's kind of what's gone with the wide receiver three use. And obviously we don't have Tim Patrick, who's they kind of replaced with a Tim Patrick clone in Taselaw, a guy who's a good blocker and a big wide receiver. But Taselaw obviously has something to learn too.
Mhm.
For sure.
The
And
three and outs are hurting too. I mean, we got a lot of three and outs.
Hmm.
yeah,
We got a lot of three and outs. We got a lot of, you know, um, with the faults on the three. So, number of it'd be interesting to see what the percentage of that is on those catches and the percentage what Laporta's getting to see if they balance out the same. But the percentage may be higher, but we have less reps. So those guys are going to be less catches. Same thing with Gibbs and Monty running the football.
all right. James, we're getting long in the tooth here on the time. Do you have something on practice squad elevations?
Yeah, the Lions have kind of been a little more stingy on those this year than they were last year. Um, you know, they are maybe just kind of saving them because they had a couple times last year where they ran out of them for Zylstra because you can only bring a guy up three times throughout the year. So they've only used both elevations twice this season, and they did that nine times last year. where they would use both of the elevations that you're allowed each week. So, including they did that the first 3 weeks of the season and 5 of the first 9. So it wasn't like they were being stingy in the beginning like they are this time. So I think it's also just not just because of the myriad of injuries last year. So, but they used 25 last year, 11 on offense and 14 on defense. This year they've only used 10 in 8 games, 7 of those on defense and 3 on offense so far. So it's just an interesting difference this year
Yeah.
from last year.
All right. Well, what's it going to take for the Lions to win this game? I'm going to say A, do their jobs. B, avoid giving up first downs on 3rd and long. You just can't do that. And then, Coach, you just brought it up. Convert your 3rd downs on offense. Coach, what are you seeing? What's going to take for Lions to win this game?
Block and tackle and take care of the football. That's it.
Basics.
Basics. Block and tackle and take care of the football. And let's throw a 4th one on. Do your assignment.
All right. James, how about you?
Yeah, they definitely got to take care of the football. But I mean, that's the number one thing I think with everybody is to win the turnover battle. But the Lions have been pretty good about that all season for the most part. So yeah, I think they got to fix the offensive line, and it's not helping that they have another injury with Mahogany. But with all the injuries that the Commanders have, I think this is an opportunity to get back on track there and get some of those things working well.
All right. My prediction is that this will be the Lions get right game that everybody thought they were going to get right last week because Coach Campbell always gets his team focused when it is necessary. And I think they're feeling it right now. Coach, your predictions?
We are not going to lose 3 phases of the game this week. We are going to win 2 of 3 for sure.
I like that one. I like that. James, how about you?
Yeah, I think the Lions players all remember last year's playoff game, and this is going to be an opportunity for some payback. I think Penny Sewell was asked about this, and if there's any extra motivation from last year, and he just kind of said maybe and smirked. And the Lions players, they remember this. They remember things from last year. They remember how they were the number 1 seed and lost in the first round that they played. Um, Granted, the Commanders played excellent in that game. It wasn't a case like last week where the Lions just didn't play well and let the other team win. It was a combination of the two. The Commanders played very, very well, but the Lions remember that. They're going to try to exercise some of those demons this week.
All right. Well, a couple final thoughts here. One, at the end of October, the show actually hit its 100,000th download on the audio platform alone. Want to say a huge, huge thank you to everybody that listens on the audio version and watches on the video version as well. We were just our minds were preoccupied with in the last episode after that loss, so we wasn't a good time to bring up celebratory stuff. But thank you guys. It's awesome that you take the time to listen, to engage, and we love the comments, and the feedback, and just thank you so much because those are the things that just keep us going. So appreciate that. And then you guys, you heard me talk about the uniforms for a while. I gotta say this: any superstition the Lions had to have on the monochrome uniforms has to be gone because we're not undefeated on these all monochromes anymore. Like the Blues, we're like, hey, they're 2-0 with the Blues. I know you want to look good, feel good, and you do look good, feel good, but let's bring the silver pants back. It's building. It's building on social media. Just once or twice a season's all I need. Some people want it for like half the season or more. Whatever. Just give it to me twice a year, and I won't complain. All right, those are my final thoughts. Coach, you got any final thoughts?
Nope. Just get right, boys.
All right, James, how about you?
I'm all good. 1
All
0.
right. I like the sound of that. Thank you to both of you guys. Shout out to Roaster Jack Coffee Company, roasting incredible beans since '99. Visit roasterjack.com, use the code Lions. You get 20% off your next order. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. Please tell your friends and family about the show. You can find us on social media as well as all major streaming platforms. Love to hear your thoughts and reviews. Check out more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.